in this video we're going to talk about setting up assemblies for the first time. In this video there will be several different types of assemblies that we're going to set up just to give you some really good examples of how this works. So the first thing we want to do is obviously get to remsgateway.com, and from there we're going to log in. We're going to use our jstark at teslaelectric.com. Put his password in here. All right, from that we're going to go from the top tabs here, we're going to hit on the assemblies. Now on assemblies we can see that the page is currently blank. We're going to be adding some assemblies so you can see what that looks like. But I wanted to bring your attention just to a couple different things that are going on the screen. Once we get into some of the different, once we have several different assemblies, you have the ability to do some different filtering as far as showing the subcategories that those items are in. We can do the assembly types, whether they're a general assembly, service panel. So we'll quickly be able to maneuver around through those menus to show you those, and then we can sort by different things like that, and we can do a quick search on the name and be able to pinpoint it pretty fast by that. Also too, we have some tabs as far as management of categories, order of category, the general order of categories, and adding new assembly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click into add new assembly. Once we've done that, it brings us to the add new assembly screen. On add new assembly screen, I'm going to go over just a quick synopsis of the different buttons that you have going on. The first thing that we have is our assembly types. We have 4 different styles of assemblies we can design. First one being general assemblies, service panel assemblies, sub panel assemblies, and circuit breakers. Now what these assemblies will do, they're built very similar to the general assemblies on these other 3, but they'll deal more with, once you've designed them in editor, some of the different choices that you'll have within the software once you've designed them that way. So we'll talk about that as we're building some of those assemblies, but I just wanted to kind of go over that with you. The next line down we have here is our assembly name. This name is going to deal with what you're going to call the assembly that is going to show up in your menu order. Now this name, my recommendation to you is that this name be very specific to whatever you're doing. Reason being is that the icons in REMS for our assembly icons down here can be used several different times. They can be used over and over. So we want to make sure that we pick a name that is easy for us to identify with the assembly when you're picking it. REMS is great that you can use that assembly over and over, and you don't have to assign the same materials to it and the same prices to it, but due to that you want to make sure that assembly name is very specific. So the first one that we're going to do here is we're going to do standard receptacle opening. So we're going to type that in. Actually, we're going to get a little bit more specific. We're going to type standard 15 amp receptacle. Now this name is specific, like I said, so that way you can easily find it in that menu, and once you get into editor you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about, but for this we'll want to make sure that we keep it very specific. Next thing down is our categories. REMS gives you the ability to put your openings in subcategories. Now in editor you can look at all of your assemblies at once, or you can pick the ability to look at them in a category. We're going to put this one in frequently used because we use a 15 amp receptacle several times during our design. So we're going to click on that, and then the next thing over here will give you the ability to add new category, and we'll add a new category down the road just so you can see what that does. But for now we're going to put standard, or that receptacle opening, in frequently used. The next thing we have is our description. Description is going to deal with what the customer is going to read on their estimate report, their invoice report, their customer change order report. This will deal with what the customer reads. So you want this information to be specific to how the customer is going to understand it. So I'm going to type in we're just going to type standard receptacle opening. We're going to get a little bit more. You can see that I made the description very specific so that the customer knows it includes the opening and the final installation of the receptacle. So including everything so that they understand, okay, well, all these openings are also includes its trim stage too. So you'll want to make sure that you're making this very specific for the customer. Next thing down is we have our assembly icon. Now, like I said earlier, assembly icon, once you click on it, will show you all the different assemblies that we have for REMS. REMS has over 400 assemblies that we've made that you can pick from as far as images go. You'll want to be very specific about what your symbol is going to represent on your design. So in this situation, the very first one is our receptacle symbol. So we're going to click on that and we're going to hit select and close. Now remember, the great thing is that our assembly icons can be used over and over and over again on the same plan. But they can have different values. They could have either different materials, different prices. You could have, because this receptacle is cut into an island. There's so many different things, but to the customer on the plan, you're going to want that symbol to be very similar, unless you're getting very specific of showing, you know, the symbols have a very exact meaning. But in this situation, a receptacle is going to be a receptacle whether you do it as a 15 amp, a 20 amp, it doesn't really matter to them. They just know that they've got a receptacle that's going to go in that place. So that's what that's going to do for you there. The next thing is we're going to look at the different color options. You can see the 4 different options popped up on there once we pick that, and I'll give you a quick description of what that means. The first one's going to be our general style design for editor. This is going to be, you know, what we use 90% of the time. That is going to be the black color that's going to be chosen when it's put on the page. This is just your general assembly. The next thing is going to be a red assembly is going to mean that it's customer changes. This is anything that the customers put on the print, it will show in red. Then the next one's going to be green. The green is going to be for our one-time edits, which we'll talk about that. This is going to be for an assembly that has been edited. The nice thing about REMS is that it'll allow you to one-time edit an assembly on the page, and it'll actually bring you into this menu and allow you to make changes on it, whether it be parts, whether it be description, whether it be the base price. But you can do a one-time edit instead of having to go and make a new assembly for that. So, and it only works in that one plan that one time. So that's how that works for one-time edit. And then the next one is going to be for our transparent. Transparent is what we're going to use for anything that we don't want a customer to see. You can see them placed in editor when you're doing it, so that you know in editor that you've placed it, but it will not show on the actual PDF. This is basically an invisible icon that will be placed. This also is how we're going to do any type of takeoff work. Say you have a plan that comes in where the builder has already given you an electrical design. You're going to use transparent mode to basically place over the top of what they've done so that you know that you've counted it on the plan to get an accurate material count and to build your estimate and invoices. So that's how that works. But with a green background like that means that it's going to show invisible on any PDF that's printed out. So the next thing that we have is our 2 different boxes here: parts on an estimate report and parts on an order list. These are going to be, so say you have an opening that you've built, but you don't want it to show up on the actual estimate itself, you would uncheck that box. This could be for switch covers, something to that nature, where you don't necessarily, you need it to do correction, but you don't need it to charge the customer at all. So you would not put any of the description information on the estimate report due to that. And we'll talk about that once we build one of those so you can see what that does. The next one's going to be parts of an order list. That means that it will still give a description, but it will not be trying to pull any parts for this choice. It's going to be more for type of, say you're putting like your temporary fees or your your permit fees, things like that. You would still place an icon somewhere on that page, usually in transparent, because it's not anything that the customer really needs to understand, and it will still show up in the estimate report that this is part of something. But since it won't actually be picking any pieces to it, then you would uncheck that, and it would not be part of any of our order list of materials. So next option down on the page is going to be our add legend description. This is going to be a description that will be used for our customers to know what that icon deals with in our legend. REMS will produce a legend based on only the icons that you've placed on the page for the customer. So we want this description to be something that the customer can relate to. So you don't want to get real technical with this. You just want to keep it pretty standard. In this case, we're just going to do standard receptacle opening. Like I said, the great thing about REMS is it's only going to pick the icons that we've placed. Instead of building a legend that would potentially have 300 and some different assemblies, we're only going to use the ones that's going to relate to the customers. The next option we have is going to be for our hotkey. Hotkey is going to be for items that you use quite a bit. You can set a hotkey to anything that you want that deals with something that you're going to put on the print several times. Basically, it's for keyboard control. So in this situation, we'll go ahead and set one up so you can see it work. We'll do Control, and we're going to hit, we'll say Control A. So every time you were to hit that Control A on the editor, another receptacle will show up on the print. This is just in case you wanted to do a hotkey. I use the hotkeys a lot for plate covers, things like that. I don't use it a ton when doing layout, but it's just another option for you if you were wanting to use it. The next thing it gives you is your icon type. On the hotkeys, you can assign this to either our normal style assembly or our transparent assembly. Either one of those can be set. So if for some reason you were going to use this in transparent mode most of the time, then it would, every time you hit Control A, it would put it in a transparent mode on the page. In this situation, we use this in our general opening most of the time, so we're going to leave it as the first option there. And then the next things that we have in our down on our menu is going to be our add inventory to assembly. This is where we're going to actually build the materials that are going to be used for the assembly. You can see right now that it shows that this is empty. So if we were to pull down this menu, we can see the different vendors that we built. Right now we have that Crestmore Electrical Supply, also Tesla Electrical Supply House. The reason I wanted to show you the Tesla Electrical Supply House is because, say in your company you keep all of your wire in-house. A lot of companies do this. Instead of having the supply houses do it, they're able to get a better deal with bulk wire and things like that, or just materials in general that you bulk into your own warehouse. You can basically build yourself as a vendor, so that way you have all the materials that you're keeping in your warehouse, and then you're just having your guys pull out of your warehouse. So those are the two different options that we have set up so far. Like I said, with REMS, you can set up as many vendors as you wanted. So you can, this list could be 7 or 8 different supply houses, and each one of them can be picked as part of this assembly. So in this case, we're going to start this off with Crestmore Electrical Supply. We're going to go down through our list. You can see when we did our original inventory list for Crestmore, it imported all the different materials in that we purchase on a daily basis for our residential use. And if we go down through that list, we can see we're going to pick our first few options here, so you can see how this works. We're going to use the TR duplex receptacle. This is going to be a PNS part, and it shows you the initials DTC after it. Now, the reason I do DTC is, what this means is I do this as determine the color. I actually go into my assemblies and I set up a category that takes the color off of ours, off that inventory, and I just mark it DTC so that you can say determine the color. So that way you'll see when you're printing out those reports for your pick list, you can choose what style color you're going to pick in the pick list. Say it's going to be white, say it's going to be light almond, brown, whatever the option is. If you're going to be bulking in large amounts of a specific color or a general color, you'd want to do something that so the supply house could understand, okay, well, those items are going to be based off of what they pick on the report. Now, if I were to put the actual white one on here, then I would be asking them specifically to give me the white assembly or the white receptacle for this job. In most cases, you're going to use it as general because you don't want to set up an assembly for light almond, an assembly for white. You could, but it would seem unnecessary. So the best way to do that is to go into your inventory and actually add these items specifically for anything that's going to have a color. So in that way, when you're picking this, it'll just be a generalized opening for that. So we're going to add one in here, and by clicking added, you can see that now it's added that into our shopping cart. And if we click on the view selection, it'll show you that it's added that in there as part of our price. So we're going to do height selection. We're going to go back down. We want to find a plate for this. I'm going to go ahead and choose that TP8 plate. We're going to click add, and we're going to put a box on here. We're going to choose the one gang nail on box. Now, one thing before we actually pick this box is I want to show you something just so that you can see how this works. We could change the quantity of this as well. So we could change this to 2 if we wanted, and then click add, and it would add 2 boxes to our list. And I'll show you this in wire as well. So currently we're going to set this to 1, and we're just going to hit add because we only need 1 box for this particular receptacle. Alright, so we've added our options that we're going to put in for this receptacle, and you can get very specific with this. You could go down to, you want X amount of staples for this, you want X amount of wire nuts or Wegos or whatever you're using. You can break it down that specifically to your supply house so that they know what to put in there. In this situation, I leave mine a little general. I think to get down to just the exact amount of staples and wire nuts is a little bit much. I actually put a box of staples in my service build. It's easier for me to do it that way than to do staples per opening. But it just really depends on what you want to do. It's all about how specific of an assembly that you want to build. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is we've picked our parts that we're going to use from Crestmore, but the great thing about this is we can go to several supply houses and add it into our assembly. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click on that Tesla electric because we need to get some wire in here. And what I am going to do is that we have 14.2 Romex that we're going to use per foot as part of this assembly. So I'm going to put in, let's say for estimate, we're going to do about 15 feet of Romex that we want to add to that. You can see when you put in that 15, it changed that price from the 19 cents to $2.85, and we're going to click add. Now, this will take a little tweaking on your part of just kind of giving a general understanding about how much feet you use to get from one outlet to the next, and then also calculating a little bit of up and down. You're going to have to play with that number and tweak it a little bit. I usually go between 15 and 20 feet on most of my openings, just because part of my actual circuit to the room is including that wire that's needed to get to the box. So it's all about how you want to do it, and you're going to have to play with it a little bit and kind of see what works best for you. And if your guys are conservative with wire, or if they're a little liberal with wire, it's all going to be based on when you do that pull sheet, how close is it getting for you, and do you need to tweak them a little bit to get them a little bit closer. But rule of thumb is I normally use for receptacles about 15 to 20 feet. And then for circuits back to a panel, I normally use between 85 to 115, just depending on what I feel that most circuits take to get back to. But like I said, it's really just going to deal with what you feel comfortable with. So we've added our items into our assembly. We can see here that if we click on this view selection, it will actually show you all the different items that you put in. We can see that our total cost to build this assembly so far was $4.25. So that includes all the different materials that we picked. If for some reason there was one on here that we accidentally picked that we want to remove, we just simply click remove, and I'll show you that, and then I'll go back and put it back on. But if we click on that remove, it takes that box back out of the opening. Where maybe you just want to go back and pick another box. If you accidentally pick something, you can simply just go into view selection and remove it, and is the point there. So we're going to go back down, box back on here, add that box back in, and we can see it's added it back into our selections there. So now we've built this. These are all the parts that we want for our standard receptacle. The next thing is going to be our base price. Now you can see that this shows you your base price of what you had on materials, but this is going to be for your opening price, what you're going to charge for this receptacle at its lowest point. And what I mean by that is when we get in a little bit further to setting up builders and setting up jobs, you have the ability to move that opening up and down based on percentages. What I normally do is find the lowest point as an admin that I would allow my estimators to go down to. Estimators cannot change an opening down below the point of the lowest amount that you set your opening for. So say we set this at $24. This is our lowest cost that we want to charge per receptacle. Estimators, when they're doing jobs, have the ability to say, okay, well, I feel that this particular job, we could raise our openings up by 10%. So it would go 10% higher than the $24 on every one of those outlets if they chose it. They just never can go lower than the $24. So this is your peace of mind as an administrator for your company, that no matter what, they can't get it to dip below the lowest point that you're willing to go. So that's where we've set that. We've just set it at 24 on this one. So now we have all of our information in this particular opening, and I'm going to hit Save Assembly. And once we've done that, you can see now that that receptacle has become part of the assembly menu. So now we have that option sitting out there that we can look at, and we'll go over how this works. One thing you can do too is, if in this state, since it hasn't actually went to a plan yet, we could click on this standard receptacle, and we can see that it'll show you all the information of how you set this up. At this point too, it'll still give you the option to edit this assembly, but only until this becomes part of a plan. Once this becomes part of an actual estimate, you're no longer able to edit it. This will go away. Reason being is you don't want assemblies to change once you have them on the plan, because you've already dedicated yourself to saying, okay, if I were to go and edit this, then all your numbers could change on your estimates, and your materials could change on your estimates. So you want it to be specific at that point. Now, the go around to this is that we'll talk about a little bit later on, is that once we have a receptacle and it's already part of a plan, we can hit the copy button. And we'll talk about that a little bit further, but what copy is going to allow us to do is, it basically, say for some reason we realized that we wanted to change parts, that we're getting a better deal from a different vendor, or we wanted to raise the price of the assembly for whatever reason, we can hit copy, and copy will actually let you go in, and you can see that it pops up and gives us all of our different information that we originally set this up as. But we can go in and change this information again, and what will happen is, you can see after you've changed that information, you hit save and disable. What happens is this original version goes into a disable mode, and then we'll have a new assembly that we can use going on after that point. So we'll talk about it a little bit further down the road, but I just wanted to at least give you an idea what that copy button meant. So now we have our first opening in there, and we're going to go do another one. Alright, the next assembly we're going to build is a switch assembly. So we're going to click on Add New Assembly, and this will still be categorized as a general assembly. Reason that switch assemblies need to be built differently is because when we are putting switches together, we will have the potential of having so many different styles that when we were designing our assemblies, we couldn't have enough combinations to make that work. What I mean by that is, if you were to set it up as you had, let's say it's a 4-gang box, and we have switch, 3-way, 4-way, or 3 single poles in a 4-way, there's so many different combinations that you could have that there's not a good way to build an assembly that would include all of the parts out of the gate. So what we've done is we build a switch assembly that misses the plate and the box for all of our different style switches, and then we come back after we've put all of our switches together in Editor, and then we place basically a plate cover next to those switches that will allow us to correct it, which will say we put 3 of them together, we would pick a 3-port plate, and that would include the plate and the box. So that's how we correct our switches. So we're going to set one up just so that you can see how it works. It's going to be pretty simple once you see it. But this is our correction for REMS, and we'll get into it a little bit more once we get into Editor so you can see how it works. So we're going to set up our assembly name on this. Is going to be our single pole Decorah switch. Same thing. We want to keep that description specific for the customer, or for us when we're finding it in our menus. And then on this category, we're going to put this in. We'll put this in switches just so that you can see. Last time we used frequently used, so we'll put this one as switches just to give it a different category. Then we're going to do our description that's going to be for our estimate and invoice report. Okay, and then we have our assembly icon. We're going to click on that. We go down and you can see we've got a single pole switch symbol there. We're going to select that. This will be part of our estimate report. It will be part of our parts list. We'll want to do a legend description. For a customer to see on our legend screen. We won't do a hotkey on this since we did one on the last one, and so we'll go ahead and put our inventory into our assembly. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to pull down Crestmore Electric Supply here. We're going to go down to our PNS parts, and we're going to do a single pole Decora switch here. We're going to use the DTC, which means determine the color, like we talked about before. And that's all we're going to pick from Crestmore on this. And then we're going to do our Tesla Electric Supply House. We're going to put some wire to this, which in this situation we're just going to use 14.2. And we'll do 20 feet of 14.2, and we'll click add. And we've added that. If we go to our view selection now, we see that we have those parts in there, and its total cost is the $530 on that. So we're going to set this. We'll set this opening at $25 for our base price opening that we will use. So we've put all that information in, and we are going to hit Save Assembly. So now we've added that single pole Decora switch. Now, while we're on the same topic, let's go ahead and click Add New Assembly again. And we're going to do, we'll do 2-gang Decora switch cover. And we're going to put this in, we'll put it in frequently used, since you're going to use quite a bit. On your description, just put 2-gang. Actually, we're going to leave this blank, because we're not going to make this part of the estimate report. Actually, we've got to put something on there. But we're going to uncheck that box so it's not part of the estimate report. So this 2-gang Decora cover won't show up in our actual estimate since it's not going to be part of our estimate. The customer doesn't need to know how many Decora covers that we're going to be using. And then we're going to leave this as part of order list. Then we're gonna choose that assembly icon. Remember, we have over 400 of these different style icons that you can use. If we're going to use, I've got a 2-gang Decora. We're going to click on that. You can see our 4 different styles have popped up on there. We're going to put no on the legend because we don't really have a reason to add that onto the legend. In most situations, when I do my design on my plan, I put all of my plate covers on in transparent mode. This is only for you to know that you've placed your cover in your box, but it won't show up on the actual PDF that's given to the customer in transparent mode. So, and then we will do a hotkey on this one. I'm going to do Control I'm going to keep this simple. I'm just going to do Control 2 for 2 gang. And then I will put the icon type at transparent, because when I place these on the page with a hotkey, 95% of the time I'm going to be using it as a transparent. So, and then we're going to go down and we're going to add the material that we need for this. So we'll click on Crescent Supply. And what we're going to be adding is going to be 2 items. We're going to do our plate cover. And that's going to be right here. Let's use this 2 gang cover here. We'll click Add. And then we're going to add a box for this. So we'll just add our 2 gang nail on. Now, in this situation, you could do a price for this, but most of the time, on my openings at least, when I do switches, I've already figured in the cost of the plate and the box into my actual switch opening. So for me, normally, this is just to get the correct parts coming. So I set this base price at 0, because for one, it's not going to show up on the estimate report since we uncheck that. So there's no real reason to have it show up on there. So we're going to, even though we're not going to put a price for this, we still need to tell the software that we're setting the price to 0. So you'll want to make sure that you still type 0 in there, because the software will not allow you to save if you have nothing in the box, but you can set that value to 0 in the box. And once we do that, we're just going to hit Save Assembly. And now we've added that 2 gang decor plate. So like I said, with all those switches, that way we can gang these switches however we want them to be, whether it's 1 gang to all the way to 5 or 6 if you wanted to. And then you can use that plate cover option in transparent mode in editor and place it next to those switches, and it will correct the box and the plate needed, and add that material to our material pick list. So that's how we would get away with the different combinations of switches that are going on. So, all right, now we're going to add another assembly. So we're going to click on the Add New Assembly. It's going to bring us back into the screen, and the next one's going to be a different style, which is the assembly type is going to be the service panel assembly type. Now you can see everything pretty much stayed the exact same, except we've got a couple new options that have showed up on here. We've got a box that tells us our positions in the panel, and we'll talk about that once we get down there. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to do an assembly that we're going to call 200 amp service. We'll call this garage. Reason I put garage after it is because you're going to have several different style services, whether it's going to be a 200 amp garage, basement, remote panel, you'll have 400 amps, you'll have many different styles that you use for this, so you want to be able to keep track of it, because like I said, the symbol is going to remain similar for every single one that you do, so finding it in the menu is going to be important to the title. So in this one, we're going to do 200 amp service. That's going to be a garage service. So next thing is we're going to put this in, we'll put this down in service panel, and then we'll do our description for our report. It's going to be 200 amp service. Installation. This will be for our estimate or invoice reports. Now, this is the only factor that changed on this was the positions. What we've done is you have many different style or many different amounts of positions for the panel. This is important because of our panel builder schedule. If the panel is a 40, kind of standard, is going to be the 42 position panel in most cases. So what this will allow is that we'll have 42 positions or spaces that show up in our panel builder schedule, so that we can show later on when we're putting those circuits into the panel, it'll have the correct amount of positions for that schedule. So in this one we're going to use 42, and then we're going to go in and we're going to choose our icon, and we'll go to got a few different style panels. I think I'm going to blast it right by it there. We're going to use this for our panel. So now we've picked our icon for our panel. This will be part of our estimate report, part of our order list, and we would want to put this into our description. It's going to be for our legend description for our customers, so that they know what this icon means. We'll do a hotkey for that, and then we would go down and pick our parts. So we're going to go down to our parts list. We'll go down to get some Square D products over here from Crestmore. And we'll pick our panel. Pick this one here. A couple ground bar kits we'll add to the panel. You can put several different options in here. In my service build out, I put everything that's related to the panels, or anything that's related to the service, plus a few other items. And what I mean by that is, I normally put my meter socket in there. I would put wire, all my fittings that I need, my LBs, anything like that that I'm going to include in that. I'm not going to do all that for this, just because this is usually my largest assembly that I build. I put a lot of different parts in here. I also put a lot of parts that deal with just general order for our houses, whether it be, say, we talked about earlier, like our staples and some boxes of Wagos, different items like that. Every house normally is going to have a service in pretty much every situation. So we're going to, that's a great assembly to put all of your miscellaneous knickknacks that you're going to send out on every job. So like I said, wire nuts, Wagos, things like that, I normally include it in there. It's just kind of a general type thing, and plus all of my different items that are going to deal with that 200 amp service. So just keep that in mind when you're building assemblies. It depends, like I said, it really depends on how specific that you want to get towards your company. I just find that this is a good one as far as any temporary plugs or anything that we're going to be sending out on every single house. This is a good one that you can use for that. So I'm not going to go through that whole list. It usually adds up to about 20-30 different items, but keep that in mind when you're building your service ones. That's a great one just to put all of your stuff in there. So just for this demonstration, I'm just going to put the few items in there. We're going to say our base price is going to be $900 to build our assembly. So we have all those options. So like I said, really the only other thing that changed on this for our service panel is just our positions, because we're going to need, our panel schedule needs to know how many you're going to have. So really that's our only difference between going from a general assembly to a service panel assembly. So, and let's go ahead and click save. And now you can see that that 200 amp service has been added in. Let's go ahead and just keep on going. Let's click on add new assembly again. The next one is similar to service panel, but it's sub panel. The only difference to sub panel is it's got two different items that popped up on here. For one, it's got your panel description and it's got your how many spaces is it going to have? Reason being is when you're doing your panel schedule builder, it's going to automatically identify that it's a combination of both service panel and a circuit breaker assembly, because it's automatically going to associate itself two spaces in that panel already for your for your panel schedule builder. In the bin, it will have your two spaces for that sub panel. So in this situation, we're going to say that this is a 24 position sub panel, and let's go ahead and fill this out. We're going to say that this is a, let's change this to be specific. And we're going to put this in, we'll put this in service panel. This is going to be for our estimates and our invoices. Now, panel label description is going to be because, like I said, it's automatically going to put two positions in your normal panel. So we're going to say, we'll just call this sub panel. And then we designated 24 positions. It's got all the different positions from 6 all the way up to 60, so you can use any of those numbers. So what will happen in your builder or in your panel schedule builder is that you will see that you have not only your normal panel schedule, but below it you'll have the panel schedule for your sub panel. So those circuits can be put in that sub panel. So that's how that's going to work. And then in your circuit breaker bin, you'll have that sub panel as a circuit breaker too, because it needs to go in that first panel. So, and let's just go ahead and we'll use that same symbol again. We're going to use that panel schedule. Still going to have it being part of our estimate report, part of our order list. We'll in this one we're going to do, you know, actually I'm going to pick a different symbol. Reason being because customers are going to see this on the print, and if that symbol is obviously the same and we set a legend description to it, then it's going to show, it's going to be confusing for them to know why both symbols, whether it is the panel in the garage the actual panel, or is the panel in the basement the normal panel and the other one's a sub panel. So you can use a different symbol for this this particular assembly for sub panel, and then we'll add a legend description. We're going to go ahead and leave hotkey as no, just because I'm probably not going to use this a lot. And then we'll go ahead and I'm going to pick a panel for this. Like I said, you'd want to pick up, or you would want to pick all your, you'd want to pick your panel, you want to put in your breaker. So we'll do both of those, and any fittings you might have, wire, etc. Anything that you're going to be using for that sub panel. For demonstration, we're going to keep it quick here so we don't have to dig through the list. There it is. 125 amp panel. We're going to add that in there. Also, at the same time, we'll put a 50 amp breaker on there, because we'll want that part, obviously. And then, like I said, any other fittings you might have, any cable connectors, wire, things of that nature, you'd want to put in here as well. It would be included as parts that would be needed to complete this sub panel or the sub panel opening. We'll say this is going to be $500 for our base price. And then we're going to click Save Assembly. So now we have our sub panel in there as well. So that's how that particular opening works. The last one that we're going to go through is we're going to click on Add New Assembly again. And the last one on our list is going to be our circuit breaker assembly. So we're going to click on circuit breaker, and you can see that it's going to give you two different things that popped up, different than general assembly, which is your panel label description, and it's going to give you how many positions that you are going to use on panel scheduler for this particular opening. Now keep in mind, in this opening, a lot of times a circuit breaker opening is going to be it's going to be pretty similar to a general assembly opening. So good example of this is, I'll show you here. Let's do refrigerator. And we're going to put this in. One thing I am going to do here is we're going to take the time just to add this as a, we'll add a new subcategory for you real quick so you can see how this works. So let's click on Add New Subcategory, and we're going to call this, we'll call this Kitchen Circuits. Hit Save and Close. So now Kitchen Circuits has been added to our subcategory list. And you can have as many of these different subcategories as you want. Just keep that in mind as you're going. So we're going to use this as Kitchen Circuits. And then we're going to say includes circuit. Opening installed. And then for our panel description, we're going to call this refrigerator. Now, for a panel label description, you don't have to get too crazy with this, because in panel label description, you can later go on and edit those labels to be more specific. Say you have multiple refrigerators and you want to say, okay, well, I've got one in the basement or one in the garage. You can always go into panel label description and change that in the panel builder. So we'll go over that in a later video once we get into building that panel. But just wanted to give you kind of a heads up that you can change that at a later time. So, and then we're going to do our positions. Our positions are going to deal with how many positions is this going to use in the panel. And I've made this up to 3 so that if you are using this for maybe light commercial or something like that, you can use this as a 3-phase breaker. But currently we're going to set this as 1 because it's only going to use 1 space in the panel builder. And you'll see that later on as well, that when you take and pull that refrigerator circuit over to the panel builder, to where you want it located in the panel, it'll automatically propagate to the lines. If say for some reason you had it as 2 or to 3, it'll propagate to 3 of those lines in the panel builder in a row, so that way those spaces are dedicated to that circuit. So, and then we're going to pick an icon for this. We'll go ahead and go with this one that says GFI protected. Hit select. So now we have our assembly icon for this particular circuit. And then we have, this will be part of our estimate report. It will be part of the order list. We can add this as a legend description. hotkey for this. And then we're going to go down to Crestmore, and we're going to build this opening. Now, when we build this opening, it's going to be similar to that general assembly opening. So we'll go down, and let's go down here to PNS. We're going to use our PNS 3232 for our receptacle. And we'll go to give this a TP8. We'll go pick a box for this. So we'll have a single gang nail-on box. And normally in the general, after we picked our wire, that'd be pretty close to the amount of things that I would do in this. But this is a circuit breaker assembly, so not only that, but we need to get a we need to give it a circuit. So we're going to use a combination GFI arc fault breaker for this. So we'll add that in there, and then we'll give it some wire. We're going to go over to our Tesla electrical supply house. We'll use 12-2. Now, obviously, this is going to be coming from a panel. On average, I like to use somewhere around 90 feet from wherever I'm going to the panel. 90 feet is a pretty good average for us. Keep in mind, you're also going to have some that are going to go up to, if it's a garage panel, it's going to go all the way to 150 to, depending on how big the house is. We're trying to find the averages in wire. Now, when you build assemblies, especially circuit breaker assemblies, you can build ones for, 15 amp arc fault that is for a bigger house, so that it covers your wire costs in there, includes your breaker. But for demonstration, we're just going to use 90 on this one, so you kind of get an idea where we're at with that. And then if you click on the view selection, you can see the parts we've put in there. And the big part that comes that I want to bring on there is that we have that breaker as part of that, because this opening includes all the things that we're going to have to build that outlet, but it also has the breaker that we're going to need for the panel. So looks like I didn't click on the wire there. Second, I don't think I didn't add that wire. Okay, so now you can see we've got the wire that we have coming from the panel, and we've got our breaker and the parts that we're going to need to build that. And then we'll set this probably around, well, let's do $85 because it included the circuit and includes our our receptacle as well for the refrigerator. So we've got all our information in there now. So we're just going to hit Save Assembly. So now we have that assembly added, so we've got our first circuit breaker assembly. So, and you can, later on, you'll be able to see in our panel builder schedule that the importance of those different styles that deal with, whether they're a service panel or a sub panel or a circuit breaker panel, or excuse me, a circuit breaker assembly. So, and then we obviously are with our general assembly. So, with that. All right, we're going to fast forward a little bit. This is what it looks like after you have several assemblies put on a page. You can see now that we have several different lists of assemblies that we can go through and look at. You can just click on the numbers and it'll bring them up. We can also sort it by category, so we can say, well, we just want to see all the items that were under frequently used, or we want to see all the items that are receptacles. You can see that it will break it down by those subcategories if you wish to see what those are. Also, we can say, well, we just want to see any of our assemblies that are service panel assemblies. Well, it would pull up the ones that have been put underneath or have been built underneath that category. So lots of different search options here. We can search by assembly name, type, categories, different things like that for looking at different icons. We can get up to, on some of these assemblies, we can get up to 200 to 300 assemblies, depending on how big your company is and how specific you get. So you'll want to make sure that you understand how these quick searches work. We can also just do a quick search up here. So we could say, show me receptacle. We can start typing that in, and it would show you any of the things that have receptacle in its title or its description, just as a quick way to find those items. So that is how the search items work in assemblies. Now, the next thing I want to cover on here is you can see a lot of these icons on here right now are showing the green arrow. And what that means is you can see that some don't have it on here. What it means is that a lot of these items pricings have changed. And what I mean by that is that the items that we've associated to their actual materials, these prices have changed at some point. What that means is that sometime in inventory you've changed a pricing on options, or you've exported out your list to your vendors, and they've given you your list back and you've imported it in, and a lot of those different options have changed. This is REMS's way of saying, hey, your prices have changed on your openings as far as your material goes. So you can take a peek at that and say, okay, well, do I need to change any of my, is this price still for parts okay in comparison to what I have in labor in this for my base price, my base opening price? So these are specific things that you'll want to kind of keep an eye on, but it's just a quick way for you to know, hey, your prices have changed. Do you want to do anything with this? So now, two things here. Right now, currently, you can see at the bottom here, since these assemblies have not been placed on a plan, this still gives you the option to edit this. This is only temporary. Once this air conditioning opening were to become part of a plan, this edit option goes away. You can no longer edit it because it already falls on a plan. You'll want to have it that way, because if you were to edit your assemblies and you were to send out, it would change the assembly on a plan that you've already finished and sent out. So that's how you estimated it. You want it to stay with the same types of materials. You want to stay with everything the same. You don't want it to be affected, because if you did, then your pricing can change when you send out an invoice in comparison to the estimate, and different options like that. So you want to be very careful. So what we've come up with is what we call a copy and disable. So we can go in to this air conditioning opening and we can hit the copy button. And what it will do is it'll take us back into the assembly. And in here we can change anything that we originally set up on the first go around. We can change its base opening price. We can add or delete material. We can put different materials in there. We can add a description, or we can do anything that we want to do, or even change it to a different style assembly. Say you just messed up and you realize later on that it was wrong, you can go in and change this. The big thing about this is what it will do when it's done is it will disable it. So when you disable that icon, basically it still remains in the software on plans that have already been finished, but going forward on all your new designs, you can no longer use this first version. This version is now shut off. It's just there because plans already have that information, so it won't affect those plans. So that's how that works. Now the last thing with this is because this title is being used on plans that is now in a disabled mode, you would have to change this. So we would have to change this to air conditioning assembly number 2. And say we change some material and we go down here and you hit save and disable. So you can see now, if we go to the last page here, that click on air conditioning, now we're using version 2. Version 2 works, but version 1 is now shut off. We can't do anything with version 1 anymore. It's just on those original estimates, and for some reason, if you wanted to change those original estimates to match the new version, version 2, then you would go in to the editor and you would delete it off, and then you would put the new version 2 on there to correct that. So that's how you would go about that as far as doing copy and disable. So this next part is going to deal with buttons that we talked about earlier in the video as far as the manage categories, order by category, and general order. This is only an organizing, these are organizing tabs for your assemblies. Say we have on manage categories, we can add categories onto our submenus like we did earlier when we were producing the circuit breaker opening. We could add a new opening. We added that kitchen circuits opening. We can do the same thing at any time where we just go in and create an opening. Let's call this, let's get a little specific. Let's say this is for Datacom items. So we can save and close. Now it's added that Datacom items submenu for us. So anything that we produce that may deal with, any type of low voltage items, we can put in that Datacom folder. It's just a way for you to make it even more specific in your menus for when you're an editor, so that you can find things as fast as you can. The biggest concern that we want with editor is to make it as easy for you as possible, so that you feel like it's fast and everything's in an organized fashion, so that you can move around quickly in it and break it down on subcategories, so that you can find items at a much faster pace than going through a list of 300 items. This also is handy when you're on the tablet. It gives you the ability to find those items faster if they're in a better order. So with that, then the next button that we have is our order by category. So on order by category, we can say, okay, well, let's take here and let's choose categories here. And frequently used has already been added on here, so we're going to click on that. And you can see that we have all the options of items that were created in frequently used. These are all our different choices that are in there. So we have quite a few different choices that we can put on. What this is designed to do is to take all those, and instead of the order that they were created, because you could have created these over several months and they're just not in a very friendly order. But what this allows you to do is pick them and put them in an order that's fastest for you to find them in the menu. You can categorize them into switches, whatever you wanted to do, whatever style order you wanted to put them in, so that way you can maneuver the fastest through editor that you can to find devices. We want the editor process to be quick. That's the key. The faster that you are an editor, the more money that you're making. So this just gives you the option of doing that. Now, and you don't have to put them all in order at this time. I mean, you can come back and you can remove them later, and you can do whatever you need to do to make it easier for you. But at any point, you can take these items and remove them and put them in a better organized order for you, so that when you're an editor, you're grabbing things and putting them onto the page as fast as you can. So that's the trick to that. The next thing, let's go down here. I want to click save, just so you can see that it actually worked. And then it puts all these items in that order. So, and like I said, anything that you wouldn't put in that menu would still show up in that submenu under the order that it was originally created. So that is how that works. The next button is similar. General order gives you the ability to put items in order based off of when they were created. So, or excuse me, puts all of your items in when they were created, but you can go in and do the same thing. And you can make these menus so that these items show up and can be placed on here in the best order for you. You can say, oh, okay, well, I want all my fans in one space. I can remove that. Anything that's fan related, I want all grouped together. Anything that's 240 volt items, I want them all grouped together. So that way, Like I said, when you're an editor, even in general mode, you can find these items quickly. This is handy too when you're doing walkthroughs on the tablet. You want this stuff in the best order you can, so that way it's quick and easy when you're working with a customer, so that they can keep going. So that is how general order works. And then when you're done, you just click save. Like I said, you can come back in here at any time and move any of these items around. Now on the subcategory items, you have to make sure that if you want to change an item out of subcategory, you have to do that when you're creating or copying an assembly. So say you wanted to make a better submenu assembly, you would have to go in to that assembly, make a copy of it, and pull it down and put it in the new submenu menu, and then save that assembly. And then it would become part of this menu where you can actually change its order after that. So that's how that works. Once you play with it a little bit, it's pretty easy to use. Like I said, it's just another tool that REMS is offering to make that experience faster. As an estimator, that was a big thing for me when we were creating this, was to say, hey, I have to be able to use editor as fast as I can do it on paper. Even though it's saving me all that time of not having to build my estimates and counting up materials and so on and so on. I want the editor to be as quick as possible. So that's why we put all these options on here, to make these things as easy and quick for you as possible when you're doing design. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're trying to get out as many estimates as we can, and we're trying to do them where we can stay organized and clean. And that's what REMS is all about. It's about making the experience for the estimator and the customer and the builder the best experience that we can possibly give them. So that is it for assemblies. We've covered a lot of information in this video. I know it's there's a lot of things to take in, but feel free to rewatch it. And if you do have any questions at any time, remember you can always contact us at support@tawconcepts.com. We'll try to do our best to help you out in any way we can. So we're on the home stretch. We're going to create our home builder accounts and our jobs, and then we're ready to use the editor after that and take advantage of all the different options. So like I said, if there are any questions, feel free to ask. Once again, thanks for watching the video, and good luck.